Growing up in a small town in the 60s was just a way of life for me. When I moved back here a few years ago, it was just a very surreal time. It was kind of like a time capsule. A lot of things had just stood still. And moving back here in the house just captured so many memories. I mean, every room I could just hear voices. The house was our haven, and all of life's problems seemed miles away. When you revisit a place from the past, you realize some things were not the way you thought they were. But yet, even in a small town, some things change. Growing up in a small town in the 60s was just a way of life for me. A typical day at our house, Mama would come upstairs, open the door. Terry, Nancy, and I were in the same bedroom, and she would say, "Get up, girls, time to go to school." We would drag ourselves out of bed, get dressed, get to the top of the stairs. Terry would always say, "I'm first." We'd race down, get into the kitchen, and Marstine, she was like our second mom. She would be there cooking our breakfast, and then Daddy would come down. He would eat and leave immediately because he was a doctor and he always had places to go. Terry, Nancy, and I would race to the car, and then Mama would drive us to school. Mama would always run her errands to the drugstore. She always had these bottles of medicine she'd have pick up. We never knew what they were for, but she would get those and bring those back home. When Mama would pick us up from school, we all wanted to talk at the same time. Nancy cried all the time. She did not like school. She did not want to go to school, so she pretty much fussed and complained, but Mama would just listen. So when we would get home, it was just like we had escaped life. The house was our haven, and all of life's problems seemed miles away. Sometimes after supper, when Daddy would be in the den, smoking his cigarette, reading the newspaper, there'd be a light tap at our back door. He would always go, "Oh, who in the world is that?" He would go open the door, and they'd say, Dr. Thornton, you mind checking out Mama in the car?" And Daddy would get his medical bag and treat the patient. He never turned anybody away. At nighttime, when Daddy and Mama would come up, tuck us in, say the Lord's Prayer, and give us all a kiss, sleep would come easily to the three of us because we felt loved and protected. You know, I think that growing up in the 60s, wasn't it just simple?
It was just that innocent time.
Yeah, innocent, naive. We were just sort of in our own little world.
And people looked after each other. They would even tell Daddy, because I remember sometimes he'd come home and say, "Well, so-and-so saw y'all riding your bikes today." And going uptown, we would just do that a lot. I'm gonna go uptown, and you'd go and charge a pack of gum at Hunter's drugstore for 5 cents. And then Daddy come home and said, "I just found out you charged a pack of gum for 5 cents. Nancy, you can't be doing that."
On Tuesday nights, y'all remember Daddy would always have his poker nights.
Oh, yes.
So Mama would order extra groceries. They also needed ice.
And then you remember the guy that was doing the ice, his name was Mr. Roy. He was always so sweet. He'd say, "Well, hey, Doris, how are you today? What can I get for you?" I can remember saying, "Mama, why doesn't Mr. Roy have any front teeth?" And she said, "Well, honey, he just probably didn't look after them." So I remember we got home, and I said to y'all, "Let's be sure we brush our teeth extra tonight so we could keep our front teeth." I think that my personality is a lot like Mama's. The things that she taught me is just kind of things that I did throughout my life, like taking cookies to the neighbors. And then Terry, what do you feel like she is?
She's got just such a vivacious personality. Mama was like that, perky and energetic.
Nancy reminds me a lot of Daddy in some ways. You stand up for what you think is right, and you don't back down.
Marstine, she just did a great job of cooking. We loved all of her meals. She would always be the best babysitter too. You remember, we'd always beg for her to stay rather than Grandma and Granddaddy. Because we'd think, oh, she's so fun. And she would. She would just come over here, stay the day, and spend the night.
I was very protective of her. You knew that she loved us.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no question about that. And we loved her too. I mean, she, in her infectious laugh that she had all the time, and she was part of our family.
My mom had a good name here in this town, and everybody knew her, and she can go anywhere in this town. The only thing you had to do is mention who child you was. With the Thorne family, my mom worked for them over 30-something years, so really we all are family. My mom, she used to always talk about Miss Donna, because most of the time they would sit here and talk, mostly during the daytime while she was working. And she loved her job. She would always talk about what happened during the daytime while she was here.
She did her part as a lady. Now, I ain't never missed a meal, so she did good, you know.
One time I had gone uptown with Marstine to the drugstore, and I noticed she was at the side of the drugstore, you know, where the door is. And I said, Marstine, come with me, we'll go up front. And she said, no, honey, I got to stay right here. But she never told me why. And of course, Marstine being black, you know, that was the law back then. I hate to say it, the Jim Crow laws that were in existence, but they weren't allowed to go in the front of the store or be shopping anywhere where white customers were.
When we first moved here, I remember I was in first grade. Janice, you were in kindergarten, and Nancy, you were probably
I was three.
And Jan and Diane and Mr. Owen were our neighbors. And from the very beginning, I felt like they really embraced us.
Well, I remember Jan, she was just so soft-spoken. I was very drawn to her because we had the same name. I remember watching Diane put her makeup on. I love that.
Putting on their lipstick, I just thought, I cannot wait to where I can put some lipstick on, like they did.
I guess I was more like a big sister. They would come when Jan and I were cheerleaders at a ball game, and while they were sitting up there, I would go get them and bring them down and let them cheer with us, you know, during the game. And they just thought that was pretty cool.
Jan and Diane were teachers' cheers. So we'd go on their front lawn and they'd line us up and show us different jumps to do. And one day when we were doing it, I noticed that Jan was not able to jump, and when she did, she kept rubbing her knee. And I said, Jan, are you okay? Because I always would perceive things about people, even physically or their expressions. And she said, yeah, I just kind of strained it at PE. So she kind of just shoved it off. So I just didn't think anything about it.
The first time I noticed that something was wrong with Jan, I remember looking out our kitchen window and we could see their driveway. And I remember seeing her getting out of the car, and I noticed she was limping.
Here was Jan, everything was perfect with her and Diane, and then all of a sudden, something's not right. And they would just kind of say, oh, you know, she just kind of strained it. So nobody really told us what was wrong. Mama was on the phone one day, and I noticed that she had a very sad tone to her voice. And she kept saying, well, I'm so sorry, Dot. I am so sorry. So when she got off the phone, I said, Mama, what's the matter? She said, well, honey, it's something about Jan. So Terry and Nancy, I gather around Mama and says, what's wrong with Jan? And she said, well, she has something called cancer. And I said, well, what's cancer? She said, well, and about that time, Daddy walked in, and Mama was in tears, and we were confused. So Daddy got wind of what Mom was talking about. So he took the three of us, sat us on the stairs and said, now girls, let me tell you what cancer is. So he explained it about being a disease and how it was in her bones and that they were going to have to take the leg off in order to save that leg. And of course, our first reaction is, she can't walk anymore. You can't, why do you do that? You can't do that. And Daddy said they will make it so that she'll be able to walk again with an artificial leg.
She was so gracious through all of this. If we ever went over to visit her, she would allow us to be part of what she had to go through. She actually would let us try her artificial leg out.
She took the fear of that horrible thing that she was going through by including us and making us feel like it's going to be okay. She was a cheerleader, and they really wanted her to cheer with them that season. They would change the cheers where she would be able to participate. And I thought that was really kind of the cheerleading squad, that they wanted her to be included and that they worked at it where she could be included.
When I was in the 3rd grade, the teacher came in one day and she said, class, we're going to read Cinderella today in our reading groups, and we are going to act it out for the elementary grades. So everybody kind of look over it, and I'm going to let everybody read different parts. Well, I went, oh, I got Cinderella. So she first started me out reading the Stepsister, and I thought, no, I don't want to do this. Then we get to Cinderella, and I just read my heart out. The next day, it was the day to find out what part we got. I go up, I sit down, and she said, okay, class, Cinderella will be Janice. I went, ah, yes. The prince will be Alan. And I go, a prince? No one told me a prince was going to be there. You have to dance with the prince, I thought. And so I get in the car after school and just bawl. I said, Mama, I got Cinderella. She said, honey, that's great. No. Alan's the prince. And Terry and Nancy, all they heard was Alan's the prince, and they just started. Janice has to dance with Alan. But Daddy saved the day. He took me into the living room. We danced, we practiced. He calmed me down, and the day of the play, it went great. When I was growing up, I was the sensitive middle child, but I was very, very aware of expressions on people's faces. And I just started noticing some changes in my mother that I just couldn't figure out what was going on. I would always notice it on the weekends. I'd say, Mama, are you okay? And she'd say, I'm okay. But she would never open up. I remember one time I sat at the top of the stairs and I just kept hearing, you're not trying, Doris. And Mama going, H.A., I am trying. And I thought, what are they talking about? She says, it's not strong enough. And he says, it is strong enough. You're not giving it time. So I remember telling Terry and Nancy, wonder what's not strong enough. Mama said something's not strong enough and they're arguing about something. But we were never told anything and nothing was explained. So there were just a lot of questions in our mind. And one day I can remember that we were all around and she was seeming kind of sad. I said, Mama, can you tell us something maybe about when you were a little girl? Because I thought, well, maybe we'll talk about her and I can find out more about her. She said, well, I will tell you some stories. Back when I was a little girl, there was a time when money was short, food was short, and it was just a really sad time, and they called it the Great Depression. And back in those days, people lost their jobs, lost their homes, and there were people just on the streets begging for food. And I said, oh, Mama, were you scared of them? She said, no, honey. My mother would make meals every day, and if someone came to the door asking for food, she always had a plate for them. And that just made us all feel really good to know our grandparents had been so kind that their mama got to see kindness of the family. Easter, when we were growing up, was so fun. Do y'all remember what we did every year?
We'd go to Christie's, wouldn't we, and pick out chickens.
And the chickens were always
They were colored.
3 colors.
Right. I like the pink one, Pinky.
And you liked the
Yellow one, yellow, yeah.
And I wanted the pink one, but Terry'd already picked it, so I thought I'll just do blue, and I had Bluey. I remember Easter Sunday was really neat, going to church, because Mama always made us matching dresses.
But there was one Easter that they had, and I'll never forget. We were to bow our heads, and we bowed our heads, and when we lifted up, there was a man dressed as Jesus in the front. I honestly thought it was Jesus. I was mesmerized.
I remember bowing my head and looking up, and I was so overcome with laughter. I laughed the whole time.
What were you laughing at?
The shock. But Nancy was having this religious experience.
Okay, well, think about me. I don't remember it.
Because you left, probably. It was too traumatic. Our backyard was just a wonderful playground of all different places to go and play.
And usually we'd tell our friends to meet us here too. If they came over to play, we'd say, meet us at the playhouse. So, I mean, it was such a big part of our growing up. I don't know how we always chose who got to play where. Do y'all remember the garden, how beautiful it was? I mean, it was a lush garden. Mama used to love to pick the flowers. Nancy loved to pick the flowers for people. This was an area, Nancy, your favorite area to play.
Gosh,
the fish pond area. Y'all remember when we would go to Jekyll every year? Just the drive down there, though, was just an experience, because no air conditioning in the car, and Daddy smoked, no seat belts, and I always got stuck in the middle.
The highlight would be when Daddy would go to the ocean, and he'd go play golf, and then he'd come back, it's time to go to the ocean, and just being out there and just throwing us in the waves.
Marcine went with us what year? Do you remember then when she went with us and she unpacked that she had underwear that had every day of the week on it? And I said, now Marcine, don't forget to wear your Monday on Monday. I was just right into her underwear because they had it written on the back of her underwear.
But the Wanderer had dances.
As we got older, we got to go to the dances. Did you go? Terry
I
and
went to
did.
one. I think I was, maybe 10 or 11.
Wow, I just have so many great memories of this gym.
The most exciting thing is the bell. The cheerleaders would go up at the top of the tower, ring the bell, and that meant that we won. What do you remember, Nancy, most?
I remember basketball games when you played, and when you and Jan would cheer.
As time went on, Jan was bedridden, and the cancer had spread, so she had to drop out of school. But before all of this happened, she was nominated to the homecoming court, and she was able to have on that beautiful dress and be honored through her class on the homecoming court. She looked beautiful. I remember how pretty she was anyway, but that night, extra pretty. She was only 15. She was the sweetest person. She was just beautiful on the inside. It was just that glow in the inside, very gentle to us, loved us. When Nancy was having a hard time with school, she'd give her a hug and call Nancy Nan. Come on, Nan, it's okay. You can get through it. She always would tell me things, for me that just made me feel good. So she made us feel good. She made us feel loved by them, her and her family. And we just always loved being around her.
I think Miss Dot might have called up and said, do you think Terry would like to go riding with me and Jan? Mm-hmm. And of course, I love that. So they came and picked me up, and I remember I was in the back seat with Jan, and I was laying down, and I had my head on her lap, and she was kind of rubbing my face, and she said, what are you thinking about? A penny for your thoughts. And I remember I was thinking, I wonder if you're going to die. But I knew I couldn't say that, and so I just said, nothing.
Jan gradually got worse. She started showing signs of just being weaker. We were not able to really see her that much during that period. We did go by, we would take her a card or just go and give her a kiss, because she always invited us into that home. But one early morning, Daddy received a call, and we, of course, were asleep, but that morning when we woke up, Daddy said that she had died. And it was just a very tough day for all of us, with a lot of confusion, a lot of emotions. We didn't really understand what it meant for her to be gone.
She and I were very close, and to lose her was just devastating. It was just devastating. I still miss her.
We never had to go through anything like that, especially with someone that was young and it's someone that we loved and looked up to. Around Christmas time, Diane and Miss Dot thought that having me and Janice and Nancy come over might cheer up Mr. Owen. And so they had us come over Christmas Day.
Diane and her mom and dad had us come around the Christmas tree and watch them open presents. I think they just needed 3 giggly, funny, vibrant little girls over there just to lighten their mood up. So we did, and we laughed. And then the last gift on the tree, Diane said, "Dad, you forgot to open that." And he opened it, and of course it was a picture of Jan from homecoming. And of course, Mr. Owen couldn't take it, and he had to leave the room, and then we all got sad, and it was just a tough time for all of us. When Diane was going to graduate from high school, we were like, what are we going to do? Our best friend is not going to be here. We had been so close to her. Even after Jan died, Diane stayed very involved in our lives. Not only did we help her pack some things, she actually invited Mama, me, and Nancy and Terry to go with her. So we drove in a separate car to her college to drop her off. And I can so remember all of us tearing up, Diane especially, when we all had to say goodbye. But Diane taught us so many wonderful, valuable lessons that we felt like we could go forward as preteens, teens, on up. And I think the biggest honor for Terry, Nancy, and I in high school was that we all 3 got cheerleader. It came full circle. You know, we had watched them all our lives, cheered by them, and then we became the cheerleaders.
What scared me, I guess, as I realized that the world is a scary place, was the missile crisis.
Yeah,
The Cubans, because it was so close. We were so close, really, to having war.
I mean, it was hard. That's all that was on the news. That's all that Mom and Daddy talked about.
People were actually building fallout shelters where they went in. I remember Daddy telling us if we were ever uptown and that siren goes off, to run over to the post office because they had a fallout shelter under there. It was like our world is being rocked because, you know, we've got to find ways to protect ourselves.
Kennedy's assassination was unbelievable. I'll always remember I was in class and all of a sudden, you remember on the intercom, and they let us hear the news. And I remember my teacher just laid her head down. And then on top of that, after it was going on, we watched on TV and saw Oswald being brought through the police department and was shot right there on television.
Yeah.
I think that was our first time of seeing something
Violent
Yeah.
television. That event really shook all of us.
Heiner's Drugstore. What a place. Had some fun memories here, didn't we?
We would come here when we were all in high school.
Some kids spent all afternoon after school.
But there was a soda fountain counter that you could sit on. And I remember over here is where all the magazines, 17 magazine, 16 magazine, all the Beatle magazines that came out. The highlight of my preteen days was the Beatles. So we immediately got drawn to a Beatle. Nancy,
John.
George, Ringo, and we all loved Paul.
Daddy was appalled by the long hair, so that was when the transition of going into those haircuts.
What the highlight for us is we got to go to the concert.
And those girls were screaming.
They screamed the entire concert, they screamed.
Well, of course, the highest compliment you could ever give a band would be to emulate them. And Janice, you and your friends, and y'all actually performed at the movie theater before A Hard Day's Night.
I was Ringo, the drummer. I had knitting needles. And then I don't know what the drums were.
It was a high-class performance. That's all I can
She was the manager. Mama began showing signs of she was not well. She usually always would come downstairs and get a cup of coffee. I mean, that was just the thing. And we came down one day for breakfast, we were older, and said, "Mama, why are you drinking water?" She said, "I am just nauseated." So Daddy came down, overheard it. He said, "Well, Doris, come on up to the office. I'll draw some blood and see what's going on." And so she took us to school, and I said, "Mama, I hope you feel better." So she goes to the office, and Daddy draws the blood, and then Daddy starts laughing. He said, "Doris, you're pregnant." Well, immediately she went, "What?" She was just completely shocked. She was 40, and she had, preteens, and it was like, this can't be happening. And not long after that she found out she was pregnant, her daddy died. She had a lot of guilt, not really getting to see him as much as she got older, and she just had a tough time coping. And it was a tough pregnancy, but 9 months later, little David's born. And he came at a wonderful time in our lives. We were thrilled it was a little boy.
Hey!
So when David came into the world, Nancy was 10, I was 12, and Terry was almost 14. You can only imagine what our life was like.
When I was younger and they were all here, it was like having 5 mothers. It was my mother, Marstine, and 3 sisters because they were so much older than I was. So I couldn't do anything out of line. I mean, I was constantly being looked at. I mean, if I'm looking back on it, I mean, you were sisters, but I never knew what it was like to grow up with anybody my own age, where y'all did. The one thing I think I did get from Mama. Mama was very impatient, and if something was on her mind, she had to do it right then.
Yep.
You're the same way. And I still have that kind of short fuse that Daddy had.
Daddy's personality was strong-willed. He was very bright.
He was always willing to give you advice, whether you wanted it or not. He always said, nobody's going to look after you like you do. And your decisions are your decisions. You don't have to follow the crowd.
I felt like both Mom and Daddy gave us unconditional love. I felt like that no matter what I did, they weren't going to quit loving me no matter what.
Mama's depression became worse and worse as time went on. I remember hearing just shouting, and Mama finally said, "H.A., I need help." And I realized something was wrong.
I think Daddy realized that she did need some help, that she wasn't going to be able to snap out of this on her own. Mama's depression, the way they used to treat it back in the 50s, 60s, maybe even before then, is they would give you shock treatments. The thought was that they were depressed and the shock treatments would help break up that pattern. Later on, they realized that does not work. So when she came back from those, she was confused because they had, I guess, shocked her brain is what they did. And once again, Daddy stepped in and just very calmly said, "It's okay. This is gonna go away. It's gonna take a little while, but she will be back to herself." And that kind of coincided with homecoming. I had been elected to be on the homecoming court, and I didn't have a dress to wear. And once again, Diane comes to the rescue. She has all these dresses that she has had in the past. We try them on. We pick out which one looks the best. She fixed my makeup. She fixed my hair. She got me all ready. And she stepped in and she met a need when Mama couldn't be there. And, Mama happened to be there that night, but she was still confused. And I'm not even sure if she remembers much of the whole festivities.
Wow, what memories. This is the school that I went to first grade through 12th grade. It looks a lot like it did. This is the breezeway where Mama would drop Terry, Nancy, and I off, and we would run down there when we were younger. 12th grade year, my 12th grade year, desegregation began. And one class period a day, we were required to line up here, get on a bus, and go to F.T. Corey, which was the black high school, for that class. Then come back, and then we would continue the rest of the day here at our school. This period of time also was a change for Daddy in his office, because before it was mandated that you had to have in these buildings segregated waiting rooms. But when this time came, he was so glad that he could finally open up his office and make it one room for all races. Wow, Daddy's old office.
Guys, do y'all remember when they had the two doors there? One door went into where the white patients would go. The second door was for the black patients. I was off at college when Daddy put both of the waiting rooms and made one.
When I was graduating from high school, it was kind of ironic because David was graduating from kindergarten. Here he was, my little brother, graduating from a whole different world that I had already gone through. That just shows you the wide gap in our lives and the different transitional period that we were going through. Do you remember the high school graduation picture that Mama took of us both in our caps and gowns? You were in kindergarten graduating and I was in high school.
Yes.
And
I don't remember it, but I remember seeing the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was ironic. We were both wearing the exact same
That's right.
graduation outfit.
And you were just beginning and I was through. So when David was graduating from kindergarten, a part of me wanted to really be in his shoes, to walk that life again, to be a little girl again, not be as fearful, not be as bashful and timid as I was. Here I was, so innocent, and here I'm going to this huge university, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I was so used to my little small town life, my little sheltered room. My sister Terry was there, which was good because I knew that I would have my older sister there and she could kind of pull me along and help me. So I get there and my eyes are totally opened up because there's just a different world there. We've got the hippies going on. We had the streaking going on, which was another weird thing going on in the 70s. But it was also a fun time because I got to experience things that I always wanted to do. I was getting to go to these classes and study things that I was always interested in, meet all these neat people. And the benefit of it was I met my future husband.
Where we used to see it?
I think it was toward the middle right here. Daddy was on the end and Mama and the three of us fought over who'd be on the other end.
I think it's just really neat that all three of us got married here because this church was just so special to us growing up.
When I got married, David was really young, I think 8, but it was really neat having both of you in my wedding, having him there.
Yeah, and then when I got married, there was no doubt I wanted it to be in the church, just like I wanted everything like Terry's.
Well, y'all had attendance, and you two were the only attendants at my wedding.
That's right.
Because I wanted a smaller wedding.
And Nancy wore my dress.
And I wore her dress, and we kept it all. It seemed like 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
And they would, the chimes back there, they would ring those chimes at 3 o'clock.
It was late in the summer and my father went to the golf course. They asked me if I wanted to go. I forgot to bring my fishing equipment, so I couldn't fish, so I was stuck there. So I called my mother up on the phone. I said, I don't have my fishing pole, I don't have anything to do, I don't have any friends here. Can you come get me? So she was a little flustered on the phone. She pulls in, rolls down the window, and just tells me, Ned, get in the car. You know, you should have known this before you went down there, this and that and the other. So I said, okay. I thought, man, I'm gonna get it. So I opened the back door and I put my golf clubs in the back seat. Shut the door with the intention of walking around and getting in the front seat. So as I shut the door, my mother takes off in the car, thinking that I'm in the back seat. Anyway, make a long story short, I waited for my dad. Now I had no golf clubs, I had no fishing, and I got a mad mother. From what she told the story later, she just laid into me the whole time. And finally, when she got probably 5 miles down the road, just kind of looked and said, well, he is being really quiet. But I don't think she realized it until she got home that I wasn't in the back seat.
Your first child was in
77.
and mine was 78,
80.
and then we all started having them in the 80s. So it was kind of different because you were in high school, and here you were with sisters with children.
Yeah.
They loved Uncle David. That was just the highlight of our children coming home. In the late 80s, Daddy started to experience a lot of pain in his stomach area, and they found a mass on his liver. And unfortunately, it was cancerous. Toward the end of his 2-year battle, David was engaged to get married.
When my dad went to the last visit to the doctor, when the doctor said, we've done all we can do, my dad, without asking, said, my son is getting married in August. And without really saying, am I going to make it to August, he was implying that to the doctor. But he trained himself to be my best man, and he practiced standing up for 20 minutes at a time so that he would have enough stamina to do it at the wedding. So he was bound and determined to do that. That was my dad. I wouldn't have thought anything any different. He set goals and he was determined, and I had no doubt that he was going to live. But I mean, I would have done the same for him.
So the day of the wedding went great. He was just wonderful. He stood up there so proud. After several months, the condition got worse. And the one good thing about it is I got to tell him goodbye. I told him how much I loved him, and I thanked him for everything he'd done for me.
It does not matter what illness you have. If you have no illness, nothing really prepares you for death. Daddy was 65 when he died, getting ready to turn 66, my age, and you know, his life had just been taken.
Marstine, I thought, was just the best person ever. She was my second mom. And the day Mama called me to tell me that Marstine had died, I was just crushed.
Right before my mom passed, she'd come up and spend the week with me that week during the holiday. And I brought her back home, and she said, I sure enjoyed myself. I really had a good time. And when I was on the road, I was a truck driver. I've been on the road 33 years, so I've been on the road. And they called me whilst I was in Virginia and told me what had happened. That was the hardest ride back to the house.
It was, you know, the end of a person that was just so very important in my life, and I think all of our lives. She probably didn't know how much she held the family together because she was always there for us. I hope she knows how much she was loved. I think Marstine was Mama's best friend. I mean, she was her confidant, and Marstine was one that would just listen. She was a listener. She didn't try to give advice, she just listened. And she listened with sincerity too.
When I moved here in the house, I wanted to have treasures of everything about my growing-up years. And behind you, Flenard and Curtis right there, is the main thing we have every Saturday, Marstine's recipe. Fried chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, homemade biscuits, and sweet tea. So I thought, well, that has to be a part of it. And such memories, oh my goodness. She saved Nancy from many a bad date.
Really?
Yeah, she said, no, you don't need to go out with him. He's not good for you. Yeah, she protected Nancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the baby girl?
Baby girl.
Yeah, that was just like her child, because she always told me that Nancy was the one I raised.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, she was so funny, because my mom, she would come up here, like I said, Miss Thunder would come pick her up. They miss each other so much. And she would come get her 2 days out of the week, even though she was already retired. And she would come to the yard sometime and not pick Mom up and bring her here. They would just sit in the yard and talk.
Well, that friendship just never went away. But she lived a long life and such a sweet life, and I mean, great memories.
Yes. Yeah, a whole lot of memory.
Aging is inevitable. And in the case of Mama, she was getting older. And we just had to face that. And when she got older, things got more difficult for her. She was a young widow. Daddy died when she was 65. So as Marstine left her life and she gets into her 80s, it just became harder for her.
When she lost that ability to drive, the part of her where she was always out, going to the grocery store every day, visiting people, that part of her life unfortunately came to an end. It was around spring of 2013 when my brother got in touch with all of my sisters and I and just said, we've got to do something. So there was an assisted living facility here. We made the choice as a family to let her go there. One of the times that I visited Mama in the assisted living, we were talking about her childhood days and those friends that she had lost that had already passed on. And she said, Nancy, you lose heartstrings over the years with the ones you were once close to. And that just resonated with me because when you really think about that, that is what happens in the cycle of life.
As time went on, the doctors felt like it was time to put her in hospice care. So I flew in to help her, and then one day we talked to Nancy and said, this would be a really good day for you to come over to visit. So she did, and as we were all around Mama talking, laughing, funny jokes, Mama wasn't saying much. She just kind of laid there. All of a sudden, she was having chest pains, and she was grabbing, she was hurting. She said, what do I do? What do I do? Girls, do you love me? And I said, Mama, we do love you. We all love you. Well, she started looking around the room for David. So I called him, and I said, David, you need to talk to Mama. And so he did. And he said, Mama, you're going to be fine now. You just hang in there. You're going to be fine. So he got off the phone, and Nancy had to leave to go home. And Terry and I stayed, and the nurse said, your mother doesn't need you right now. Y'all can leave the room. So the nurse said, just call me if you need anything. But we noticed that her breathing became very loud. So we went in to check on her, and she took her last breath. So I got to say goodbye to Mama too. It was just the saddest day of my life, of all our lives, but we decided to put on her gravestone that she filled our lives with laughter and love. And we can still hear her just laughing, her cute little laugh, and just putting her arms around us and just loving us all like she always did.
Everywhere she went, she just brought joy to people. I appreciated that about her.
My mother, she was a saint. I mean, I can honestly say that. She was not prejudiced in the least bit. She never looked down on anybody. She always treated everybody equally, and we were instilled that growing up.
Growing up in this house with Mom and Daddy and Janice and Nancy and David, I look at it now and I think what a unique, wonderful experience it was. At the time when you're growing up, you're just growing up. You're just trying to get to the next day. You don't appreciate all that you have while you have it. And it's after you've gone through it and you look back and you think, man, I had a wonderful life. Our family wasn't perfect, but I will say, I can't imagine living any life that's more perfect than what we had.
I would not take anything for this life that I lived in this small town. I mean, moving back here has made me realize how special and how wonderful it was, and it still is. I just hope that you'll always know how much we love you and we appreciate you.
I do. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
I love all y'all. I love you forever. Bye,
So
sweet
many
girl.
wonderful memories. Thank you so much.
This house was once empty with just memories. Now the home has become the gathering place. New generations are now coming into this home, extending laughter and love, just like Mom and Daddy did. I look back on my life and I feel like through triumph and adversity, love was just threaded throughout this family.